the St. John Council Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, November 22nd to order. And the first order of business is we have the minutes of November 8th. Moved by Her Worship, seconded by Councillor Radwin. All in favor signify by aye or raising your hand. Contrary minded, carried. Item number 3 is an approval of the agenda. Her Worship again, Councillor Norton. All in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Contrary minded, carried. Item number 4 is the disclosure of conflicts of interest, if there are any. Seeing none, we'll move on. There's nothing on the consent agenda. That takes us to item 6, business matters. Check my cheat sheet here. And Enterprise Resource Management. I believe Stephanie Rackley-Roach is with us to introduce this topic.
Good afternoon, Chair Sullivan and Finance Committee members. We were before the Finance Committee in April of this year to introduce the ERP project. Since that time, Rachel Van Wert has been assigned as the city's ERP project manager. Ms. Van Wert led the design and implementation of the city's integrated customer service center. And so we are very confident in her leadership in implementing a new ERP, something that will be transformational in how we do business and enhance customer service. The purpose of this presentation is to give an update on the project plan and progress and create awareness on future funding approvals and resourcing that will be required to make this project a success. And I'll hand it over to Ms. Van Wert.
Thank you, Director Rackley-Roach. And just one moment as I share my screen. Okay, so good afternoon, Finance Committee. Thank you for your time today. As Stephanie mentioned, I will be providing you with an update on the city's ERP project. So as a reminder, Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP, refers to a type of software that organizations use to support service delivery and manage day-to-day business activities, such as accounting, procurement, inventory management, human resources, and project management. The integration of these activities through a common database ensures an organization has data required for analysis to streamline business processes, improve service delivery, meet compliance requirements, manage risk, and make decisions. So with that, as an introduction to the project, we are modernizing the way that we do business. So we're preparing for the future city of St. John and future generations of citizens. The way we do business now is not how we will be able to do business in the future. We must change and adapt. So this is a generational project, which is typically undertaken by organizations every 20 to 30 years or so. And it will require significant amounts of resources, both time and money, in addition to human resources available to deliver the project. It is the largest transformational project that supports working on the business of local government and will impact all employees and the citizens of St. John. So you may be asking, why are we replacing our current system? So replacement of the system is overdue, and the proposed solution will set the city on the right course for meeting the existing and future needs of a growing and vibrant municipality. So while the current ERP has served us well for more than 20 years, it's no longer able to securely support advancing business and financial reporting processes. And several of the ERP applications implemented in the early 2000s have been replaced with standalone solutions to meet evolving service needs. So the current ERP is running on an operating system that presents challenges with new hardware and the city's current technology environment. So what is the goal of the project? The goal is to implement a system that will create efficiencies to ensure more resources are dedicated to core service delivery, enhance internal controls and reporting, manage risk, move closer to a paperless environment, improve the customer experience. So the result will be more money saved, improved collaboration, better analytics for decision making, improved productivity, happier customers and citizens, simplified compliance and risk management, and improved planning and resource management. So I think we can all agree that these are results that everyone would like to see. So as the project manager, I have been seconded to the project for a 3-year term to see the project through to implementation. I report through to Stephanie Rackley-Roach, and as such, she'll be in the role of steering committee coordinator for the duration of the project. The executive leadership team will serve as the steering committee, engaged through phases of the project to support, report on progress, or meet to obtain strategic direction and approval. Senior leadership will also similarly be engaged at decision-making milestones throughout the project and provide support as required. So we have pulled together a strong project team with members from across the organization with varying skills, backgrounds, and perspectives. This will be the project team for the next 6 months, the first phase of the project, recognizing that as the project moves through various phases, additional resources will be required. So the project team is Carrie Smith, Chris Finney, Jody Forgy, Catherine Shannon, Katie McCarthy, Richard Evans, Sarah Ranson, and Eve Legier. So a very strong team to support us in this first phase. The multi-year project has been broken out into 3 phases, as I mentioned. So the first phase will be the readiness assessment and requirements analysis. Our consultant, BDO Canada, has been engaged to lead this 6-month phase, resulting in a report which will inform how we proceed with the future phases of the project. So the deliverables from this phase will include information such as current state and areas of improvement, business readiness assessment, business functional and technical requirements, applications for integration, applications that will be identified to stand alone, and data migration requirements. So what information are we going to bring over to that new system? We'll be conducting numerous workshops and engagement efforts with staff from across the entire organization to collect this information. Phase 2 will be focused on the RFP development and award of the ERP solution. So that's estimated at this time to take around 8 months to complete. The RFP award will occur in November 2024 after the 2025-2026 capital budget has been approved in October. And then finally, you'll see on the slide, phase 3 will be the implementation of the ERP solution over 12 to 18 months, which will likely only be 1 to 2 modules. And usually best practices, what we're seeing with research, is that finance and HR are usually the first ones to be implemented. And typically with software implementation of this nature, they're using an agile project management approach to do the implementation. So just as information, that approach is an iterative approach to managing projects and teams that focuses on incremental changes to a project throughout the life cycle. And agile method uses short cycles or sprints to develop a product or service. So that's likely the approach that we'll be taking for implementation. So budget considerations. For implementation, $2.3 million has been approved in the 2021 general fund capital budget. The consulting services for phase 1 have already been awarded in the amount of around $98,000. Capital budget required for operations will be determined in phase 1 of the project. This would include licensing and maintenance, continuous improvement, and internal human resources. So we're expecting to have that information prepared so that we know going into the future capital budget what those numbers look like. So there are numerous variables that will impact the level of financial investment required. And just to highlight a few, whether we go with an on-premise, which is our current ERP, or a hosted or cloud solution, there'll be differences there. Digitization, data storage, and data management. If decisions are made based on digitizing versus having a hard copy of something. System integrations and standalone applications. So what systems will talk to each other and which applications will run independently. Human resources for project implementation and operations, as I previously mentioned. For example, additional internal subject matter expert staff will be assigned to the project. And we need to make sure that they have the bandwidth to be able to contribute to the project. And in this case, this may mean full-time secondments and backfilling of regular duties. And finally, ongoing operating and maintenance costs. So what do our costs look like going into the future if we're committing to a solution? Other variables include security, access, and data storage, each having their own price tag, time to production, or how quickly we can get the system up and running, level of service with the software provider. So what will be included in the scope of work and what expectations will be placed on city resources. And then finally, interoperability and scalability of systems. So how well will it work with our existing systems that we want to keep, and how will it allow us to grow in the future too? We can't lose sight of where we're headed. So finally, I want to conclude with what the Finance Committee can expect for the project next steps and engagement, which is all dependent on resourcing. In the spring, we'll provide a progress update at the end of the first phase of the project before we start into the second phase, which is the RFP development. And then in the late fall, as I mentioned, we'll return again after the selection process is complete to provide a system recommendation, followed by proceeding to council for final award and approval. Finally, once we hit the implementation process in early 2025, we'll provide periodic updates on the project to the Finance Committee. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, concerns, or feedback. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. If you can stop sharing, and I can see the committee. Committee questions for Ms. Van Wart. Your Worship, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Rachel, I'm just curious with this field is changing so fast. When you buy something like this today, what is the expected longevity of it? I know at the first slide you said we change every 20 to 30 years, but I would not expect that would be the same going into the future, or is it?
Yeah, through the chair of the committee to the mayor. Certainly, things definitely look different than what they used to look like, right? When we bought our previous ERP system, and what we're purchasing now, like you mentioned, it's certainly not the same technology that we're buying, and technology is evolving. I can speak to saying that what we're currently using is so far behind industry standard at this time that anything will certainly be an improvement. But I think that typically organizations are still looking at a 10 to 20 year lifespan. Like we wouldn't just be buying this for 5, even 10 years. We'd be looking at long term. And oftentimes software companies, they're evolving to meet current needs in the industry. Like they're providing updates to the software. So it's not like we'll buy something and then it will be obsolete in 5 years. That certainly won't be the case.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. I was curious more than anything with the way that whole industry is changing, so quickly. And I know what a huge project it is, because we've always heard about this project looming in the future, and now it's here. And just the team go down that road. I know there's no way we can predict the future. I just thought maybe the industry was making some predictions as we go along with them, as to try to get this. The new systems organized. But appreciate your input. Great project, and I know you're the woman for the lead. That's for sure. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor Radwin.
Thank you, Chair. Through to Ms. Van Wart. I'm just wondering if staff are taking into consideration artificial intelligence, and what sort of if any concerns would you have going forward for this project?
Yeah, I see Director Rackley Roach has joined the screen. I don't know if she wants to provide commentary on that.
Through you to the chair, Councillor Radwine, AI and generative AI, more specifically, is a hot topic and is the trend in the future of where IT, information technology, is going. It's not something that we can ignore. So I just want to point out that it definitely will be a factor within what we're doing with ERP in terms of once we get to the requirement stage. It's kind of the art of the possible, and what will make everything more streamlined, particularly in terms of enhancing customer service. The artificial intelligence is kind of a double-edged balancing act in terms of the benefit to the municipality, and in our case that being the organization we are, and then the benefit to others, some with good intentions, some with not so good intentions, if you understand the threat environment around us. So we are actually, just for for the committee's understanding, it's also integral to the IT strategy and review and strategy that we're currently working on and already through the discovery phase with the Perry Group on when do we invest in AI. I can say that there are things that we can do surrounding this project with AI that can enhance a lot of things through the MISA organization, which stands for Municipal Information Systems Association. They're doing fantastic work out in Kelowna, where they're using generative AI to do some work and willing to share that with their municipal partners. So I do believe, just in terms of my role as CIO in learning a lot about how municipalities are talking about generative AI, it's a little bit of, are we going to be the innovators or the fast followers? And this, because it is so new, not avoiding it, and definitely something that will likely be part of a longer term picture of where we go, probably not the main fundamentals, but definitely would be part of the picture. And if Rachel has anything to add, I will. I just thought I would add that we are looking at it through the IT strategy lens as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's great, Stephanie. I mean, I think that there's definitely some benefit to be had, but at the same time, I know even in business, I'm looking at how it can benefit my business, and then also what sort of threats that I should be worried about in business, as bots could call you and all sorts of things could happen. I mean, we've all had some sort of occurrence where there was some sort of fraud that came through. So, I mean, it's like, how do you take advantage and at the same time mitigate any risk coming through? So obviously, if we hear of anything in the world, but I mean, obviously, you have your connections with the associations, and hopefully, that's kind of something on your radar all the time going forward. Because I think as this continuously changes, we're gonna keep seeing more benefits and more risks at the same time. So.
Thanks. Any other questions from committee? I have one. Being in my day job, being part of a large organization that has gone through a couple of changes in my career. In our planning timeline, I saw HR support. I know I really like the slide of what are all the benefits and why are we doing this. Incredibly important. This is incredibly stressful on the human resource part of the organization, who are not involved but will be end users of everything we do. Is that a significant part of the planning process and the implementation is the support? Because when we put it in, it's going to be rough and bumpy, because it's always rough and bumpy. Or are we too early to talk about that?
No, I can certainly speak to that. Change management is going to be a very important piece of the puzzle here as we implement this new system and we go through this process. So we're keeping that top of mind right from day one. I've already had conversations about change management with our core team that's working on the project. They're taking that back to frontline staff and their teams, the executive leadership team. We've been talking about change management. And the other thing that we'll have to put into the RFP and be cognizant about is the training piece. We can't under-deliver on training. It needs to be the right amount of training so that staff are comfortable using the system, and there's a willingness to use it and leverage the technology to do great things for the city. So I think those two pieces, change management and training, are certainly at the forefront of my mind as we move through the project, but certainly would have more information on that as we progress through the phases.
Super. Thank you for that. Is the recommendation at this time a receive and file update? Do you need our help doing something? Okay. Receive and file from the mayor, seconded by Councillor Radwin. And on the motion, those in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Contrary minded? Carried. Thanks very much. Item 6.2, the 2024 draft general operating budget. CFO Fudge, over to you.
As I look out my window, it's pitch black, but I still have to say good afternoon, Finance Committee. This is the objective. This is going to be a short presentation for the Finance Committee. The objective really is to achieve a recommendation with respect to bringing forward a general operating budget for receive and file to Common Council this Monday, November 27th. The proposed budget in your kit, I don't plan to go over it in detail. We went through it in quite some detail at our last meeting, but I will focus on some high-level changes, and really the focus of this presentation is to receive the Finance Committee's feedback. So just quickly, summary of our budget process in 2024 that's led us to where we're at today and the recommendation. The process included staff service presentations, staff enhancement requests to the Finance Committee directly, a Shape Your Budget public engagement initiative that provided opportunities for the public to engage on the budget both virtually, but also with specialized in-person sessions led by the Chapman Group, as well as feedback sessions with Common Council. Next year, we will be adding the service-based budgeting process to this slide. And it really does take a tremendous amount of time from the service areas. A finance department can't lead a service-based budget. It has to be based on the services and the service levels within those departments. You need the capacity to do that. So I'd certainly think that will add a very valuable layer of information for the Finance Committee and Council to consider and to look at the budget in a different way. It also integrates with our performance management objectives as well. So I am disappointed we weren't able to get to that this year, but we're certainly excited to get to it next year. So timeline, just quickly, we're here today to present recommendations on the general operating budget and the utility fund potable industrial budgets. On Monday, we'll have the general fund budget for receive and file, the operating budget for receive and file, and we will also have the utility fund budget recommendation and for first and second reading, the bylaw. And we're going to ask the Finance Committee, we thought this was going to be our last meeting for the year, but we are going to ask the Finance Committee to reconvene on November 29th. We're just not quite ready with our year-end projections, and that is an important agenda item for the Finance Committee because it does feed into our recommendations on our annual reserves. So if that on November 29th, we will go through the annual reserve recommendation and our year-end forecast. And then we're hoping on December 11th that Common Council is in a position to give final approval to the general fund, the utility fund, and our reserve report. So before we get into the budget, I just want to, this is the latest information that I've seen by scanning media, what other cities are doing with our benchmark towns and cities are doing with respect to the tax rate. Some of them are in draft form. You'll see the asterisks, including ours, still in draft form. But we have spent some time at the Finance Committee discussing tax burden. So these are tax rates. You can see how we stack up to these other communities. And we've spent the last couple meetings talking about tax burden. And before we jump into the budget discussion again, I thought I'd give another example of how by just looking at tax rate, it can be misleading when you look at tax rate on its own rather than considering the full picture of tax burden. So this slide attempts to illustrate that. So we'll start by looking at the upper table on the slide that shows the gap between the city's property tax rate and Moncton's property tax rate between 2018 and in the proposed rates for 2024. So you can see the gap in 2018 between St. John and Moncton was 13.5 cents higher in St. John on the residential tax rate. And now with the proposed 2024 property tax rate, the gap is now 15.69 cents higher than Moncton, so it's higher. So when you look at that, you'd say, oh, we've regressed. But however, when you look at tax burden, which is the bottom component of the table, of the slide, sorry, the table below, which is the tax burden. And the tax burden is tax rate multiplied by the tax base. Even though we lost a little bit of ground in the tax rate to Moncton since 2018, the residential tax burden in Moncton grew by 44.37% based on their approved residential tax rate since 2018, compared to St. John at 27.07%. And that's primarily due to Moncton having significantly higher tax-based growth over that same period of time. If including the non-residential class and the reduction and incorporating the reduction in the provincial property tax rate, overall the tax burden in St. John is up 19.8% since 2018 and up 32.63% in 2024 for Moncton. So you really do have to look at tax burden to really understand the impacts on the community. So this is the high-level summary of the general operating budget. We've gone through this at our last meeting, so I won't go through it in detail again. The only change to this slide from our last meeting is based on a recommendation from the Growth Committee to provide a $50,000 contribution to the Sophia Recovery Center, which will be funded out of the Community Services Reserve. So that was a recommendation by Growth Committee. It will go to Common Council, I believe, on Monday. So we've integrated into this with the assumption that that's going to be approved. So unless the Finance Committee has any concerns, I'd like to skip through this slide because we did go through this in detail. And I will also skip this. The only change in the budget is that $50,000 that I just referenced. And we'll go directly to this slide. So I just mentioned the $50,000 grant for the Sophia Recovery Center that's been integrated. The feedback we've received over the last 2 weeks has really only been one item, and it's been feedback with respect to the Heritage Grant and the envelope for 2024 for that budget. And I know there's a desire, I think Councillor Radwan raised it at council at our last meeting, a desire to increase that envelope by $40,000. And the data on this slide, I just want to provide some information to the Finance Committee, and then I'm going to stop and ask for the Finance Committee to provide feedback with respect to this item. The data on this slide can be found on the city's corporate performance dashboard. It's a KPI in Council's priority to belong on our dashboard. And what this KPI is, it measures annually the utilization of the annual Heritage Grant. And the last measurement, it's measured annually. So the last measurement on this slide would be for 2022. It'll be updated for 2023 at the end of the year. But in 2022, this Heritage Grant had utilization of 83.25%, meaning it only we only drew 83.25% of the budgeted funds for that grant, and it was considered to be a needs improvement, result with respect to that key performance indicator, based on a target. The target is to achieve performance is to achieve an 85% level of take up on that grant. So you can see on the slide from 2017 to 2022, the grant has never been 100% utilized. But with 3 years of the 6 years that you see on the grant, 3 years were above the 85% target. So in 2018, 2019, and 2020, and in 3 years were below the target. We did discuss this with the staff for Growth Community Services. They have advised that they would recommend waiting to see how this grant becomes utilized in 2024 before committing to providing more funding to this budget. But I did want to seek the direction from Finance Committee, given this was the only item that we've received in terms of a feedback item. So I'm going to end the slideshow right here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn it back over to the chair for discussion on that item.
Thanks, CFO Fudge. Any questions, comments with regards to that item on changing the Heritage Fund grant? Your Worship, go ahead.
Based on that data, I would support that for another year. At the end of the day, changes can be made again next year if we're not at the 100%. I feel like the dip is unusual because we had COVID. We had, you couldn't get anyone to do the work even if you had the money to get the work done. So I'd like to see that year of recovery, and I'm like Councillor Redwan, I'm a big, huge supporter of heritage. I own a couple of heritage buildings, so, but I think it would be reasonable at this point in time to wait and see what this year brings for requests.
Thanks, Your Worship. Other comments? I'll put my 2 cents in. I see a hand somewhere. Oh, Councillor Redmond, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I think, I'm comfortable with staff's recommendation. I just kind of felt badly that, that the letter that went to staff didn't really reflect the ask that the committee that the board had wanted. There might have been just a misunderstanding. So I really wanted to bring attention to committee on that. But I think that first of all, there's a couple of things to consider. This is one way to keep beautification, first of all, still going into Central Peninsula. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing is, of course, everybody's dealing with inflation. And I know that Jennifer Kirchner had given some examples on how extreme that the prices have gone up for heritage property, specific items. The other thing is I know there's huge tax-based growth that happens with heritage property investments. And we have seen some data, and I'm going to try to get some of that information for staff that show that the investments that are put into heritage, actually it's quite significant of a multiplier, we'll say, when it comes to tax-based growth. So anyway, I'm happy with us leaving the budget as it is. And then if we're seeing that uptick, and of course there is process that heritage property owners have to go through. Sometimes they go to the board, they have some misunderstanding, they have to go back to the board. So keep in mind that sometimes delays things in getting approval as well. So the board has gotten rid of a fair amount of red tape, we'll say, from 2017 up until now. So we could even see more of an uptick because of that. But if committee kind of keeps it in their mind as a consideration in the future, if we need to maybe get, I don't know, I know CFO Fudge, you mentioned there's some sort of reserve that could be taken from if there was an uptick for next year. Maybe we can consider that going forward. Which reserve was that, CFO Fudge?
There's a couple of options. One, there's reserves through the growth committee, which would be the community services reserve, but we also have the operating reserve, which is intended for not reoccurring. It's for one-time adjustments. So if we consider an anomaly in a year where we thought there was going to be a year or two of, abnormally high request, it would meet the requirements of the operating reserve, pending that it was a one-time dip or I guess a blip in the projection. So there are options for us to come back and revisit this discussion with the Finance Committee if we need to.
Yeah, and I think we need to keep in mind, like I had mentioned, Kevin, too, earlier, that, our heritage properties really give significance for our tourism, as well as that unique look. And I love to mention when I'm watching Moncton Council meetings, they keep talking about the few heritage properties that they have, and we have so many to celebrate. So I love that. And so anyway, they're just beautiful. It brings this uniqueness to St. John. So anyway, just love for committee to consider that going forward.
Thanks, Councillor. And I think it's a good point. I think for budget purposes, I think we're good to continue on with what we have in front of us. Certainly, we have proven to be nimble enough that if something comes in next year, and it would be lovely if there were such a significant number of requests because people choose to do many renovations, that we're nimble enough that we would find a way to cover those requests. As Councillor Carl Killen said back in the day, we are, as a St. John City Council, we will spend a lot of time talking about $40,000 and then spend 2 seconds in passing multi-millions of dollars, and we sneeze $50,000. So really, this money is a good multiplier. It does wonderful things uptown. And I think Prudence says do the budget the way we've got the budget, but be bright enough to know that if those requests come in, we will find a way to manage them. Does that make sense? Okay. Does that work for you, CFO Fudge? Does that answer your question?
Well, that's great. That's great feedback from the committee. Thank you. I only have a couple more slides. I'm going to share my screen again if it's okay with the committee. So I'm not going to go through this all over again as well, which is the good news stories of the budget, but we will do this at council when they receive this for the first time. But before I get into the recommendation, I would like to just reiterate that the 2024 operating budget includes enhancements in many service areas based on the various forms of feedback that I discussed earlier that we received throughout the process in accordance with the city's strategic plans. So we have enhancements in areas such as parks and recreation. We have enhancements in St. John Transit. We have enhancements in street cleanliness. We have enhancements on projects that focus on the business. And we have funds to help us start up with the industrial parks, which is a catalytic project for the city of St. John. We also have enhancements with respect to providing a better community support. We are demonstrating fiscal responsibility. And we also have enhancements with respect to traffic safety. And we have a number of other initiatives that aren't directly associated with the budget in terms of increased funding, but initiatives that will be part of the 2024 work plan that will also drive value for taxpayers in the city and align with strategic plans. So with that, I'll just read the recommendation that it is recommended the Finance Committee approve the proposed 2024 general fund operating budget and forward it to the next meeting of Common Council for receive and file, and endorse the following. Resolve that the sum of $187,800,682 be the total operating budget of the City of St. John for 2024. The sum of $150,579,477 be the warrant of the City of St. John for 2024, my apologies. The tax rate for the City of St. John be set at $1.58. The City of St. John set the property tax rate for heavy industrial class at 1.7 times the residential rate. That the City of St. John set the non-residential class property tax rate at 1.7 times the residential rate, and that the management professional group receive a wage increase of 3.5% for 2024. And with that, I'd be pleased to take any questions the committee may have.
Thanks, CFO Fudge. Can I get somebody to move the recommendations and we'll do questions? Or Worship, Councillor Hickey, questions on the motion? I know it's Finance Committee. We've talked about this a few times. Councillor Redmond, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, CFO Fudge, was there any consideration given to not having 1.7 rate for the non-residential property tax?
Consideration with respect to making it lower?
Mm-hmm.
No, because we looked at that before. Because the non-residential tax base went up 3.19%. What we're recommending is that from a fair and equitable taxation perspective, that we'd like to see with inflation at 5 or 6%, we'd like to see inflation shared amongst the classes, and with the tax rate reduction to $1.58, the non-residential class is actually paying only 0.64% more year over year. So reducing that multiplier to a lower number from 1.6 would probably either have the non-residential class pay nothing or actually less than prior year. So I think we're comfortable with the recommendation of 1.7%. That doesn't create a burden on the non-residential class. We are sensitive and cognizant of the fact that class is important for growth of the City of St. John. We want to be competitive, but we think that multiplier is appropriate for this year based on the assessment-based growth that we've seen in all three classes.
Yep, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
No, actually, Councillor Redmond can answer that question very quickly. Yes, CFO Fudge and I had that conversation as well, and really part of what we are seeing in our presentations, I hope we're communicating about tax burden and percentage increase from previous years of what people are actually paying in tax. because it's the assessment, it's the tax rate, it's the 1.7 if you're a non-residential class. But at the end of the day, we're looking at just under 6% in overall revenue increase, 9.91% increase on the residents. Is it 0.6 CFO fudge on the non-residential, and a reduction for the heavy industry, just because that's all we can do. Anyway, Councillor Hickey, over to you.
I just suggest to Councillor Radwan's point simply that I can't imagine it be considered for too long, given how long we've advocated for that multiplier to get to the point we're at now, even, and continue to advocate that it does in fact need to be higher, because at the end of the day, we're about to recommend a budget to our Common Council that offers that shows pretty clearly where the tax burden lies in this community, and it's largely residential. And ultimately, to Councillor Sullivan's point, giving a $300,000 cut to heavy industrial.
Anybody else? All right, we've got the motion on the floor. And actually, just before I take the vote on it, I got to send out some thank yous, because officially this will wrap up the Finance Committee's official part of this as it goes to Council's hands. We'll start with CFO Fudge, who leads the team. The conversations that we have are so rich with regards to depth of understanding of where the taxes are coming from and where they're going. And to the Finance Department, who guide us through this, they do a tremendous amount of work. We didn't see Controller Levine on today, but we know that he's watching every penny of the public's money as it comes through our hands. And certainly this budget is organizational wide, right? As much as we have a wonderful finance team, it's all the departments have a lot of work to do to bring this before us. And we need some help from our partners in order to level the playing field on where the money is coming from. But I think this is an incredibly responsible budget. And because we continue to follow our financial plan, our strategic plan, Move SJ, Play SJ, and all those plans feeding into the budget, we're making strategic decisions that are now improving the quality of life in the city. I'm excited about what's in this, and hopefully council will be too, so that we can get operating on it. And with that, I'll take the vote on the motion. All in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye. And that's unanimous. Contrary minded, there are none, so carried. That takes us to the draft utility fund operating budget. Mr. Fogan, I think this one is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll share the presentation here. There we go. So I'll try to follow suit with the CAO or CFO Fudge and not take too long here on this one. There's some new information, but also just going over a little bit of what you already saw in our last Finance Committee meeting. Just to recap just a little bit, last Finance Committee meeting, we went over the potable utility rates, where we reiterated that they would be flat again with no increases for the 6th straight year at $14.28. The budget does align with the wage escalation policy. It has an overall increase for wages and benefits of 4.59. You know, the wage escalation policy really does apply more to the general fund and growth of tax base, but we still follow the rule in the utility as well. Further to that recap, we are making a couple of adjustments, just a slight decrease in revenue that we're going to project just to be a little bit more conservative on some new metered revenue, and of course with the corresponding adjustments in expenditures to reflect that. Just a slight change. And now on to the new information. So we do have now our industrial water rates for both the east and west systems. Just a little bit of background on the industrial water rates. If the committee would remember, we do have full separation of the potable and industrial water supply, and that was achieved with the completion of the Safe Clean Drinking Water project. So they do operate separately. And in 2019, Hemson Consulting completed a rate analysis for us. And so for the east side, we do have rates for Irving Oil and for Irving Paper. And on the west side, we have rates for Irving Pulp and Paper and the NB Power Generating Station at Coulson Cove. When it comes to industrial raw water rates, they are set by bylaw, and there's a specific rate for each one of the customers that is listed below. And since 2020, all industrial raw water customers have been billed the full cost of delivering raw water via these bylaw rates. So these bylaw rates are adjusted annually, and they include the full operational cost of the service. They can include contributions to asset replacement, asset management. They include a rate stabilization reserve. They include the new debt associated with the industrial system, and also the previous debt associated with being a member of the water distribution system. So through that rate setting approach, we do come to our budget in aggregate of a little over 8.2 million, which is up from about 7.3 last year. But as I said, all of this is billed out to each of the customers through their corresponding rates. So when it comes to the customer specifically, on the East Industrial System, we have Irving Oil. Their current rate is, you can see the slides here. I don't know if you want me to go through each exact number. You probably already saw them anyway, but rather than go through the 0.09, 0.8 per cubic meter of water, I'll let you see it here. But there are slight increases for each one of the customers on the east side. And also on the west side, there's a slight increase per cost of cubic meter. So the recommendation is in the final slide, and I'll read that one as well. The Finance Committee approved the proposed 2024 Utility Fund operating budget and forward to the next meeting of Common Council for approval the first and second reading of the water and sewage bylaw amendments. And with that, I will stop sharing. Up for any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Hogan. Committee questions? No questions? Your worship, moving the recommendation?
I am moving it, but I would like to just make one little statement because this is, I know it's in the kit, we've talked about it before, but the 6th year in a row that there's been no increase in the rate. I don't think we can say that enough. I think that's impressive work by the team because costs have gone up and the cost to provide water, sewage have gone up. And so, you know, but we've managed to keep that for 6 years, and we've seen a lot of inflation over those 6 years and a lot of work done over those 6 years. So I want to say thanks to the team for that. Appreciate it.
Good comments. Seconder? Sure, thanks, Councillor Hickey, for the second. Councillor Norton, comment, question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I know we've talked about this as well, similar to what the mayor said, that, you know, just for the public's benefit, that especially with the industrial, that it's a user pay model, that we're obligated not to charge more than it costs to deliver the service. So I know sometimes during these times, why are we not charging more on the industrial side of things? But really, the team is obligated to only charge what it costs to deliver the water and maintain the infrastructure that's put in place by way of the network that's underground. So I think that's consistent with what we've been told and learned over the past. But it just bears the reason why we can't jack the price on industrial users. If that makes sense for you, Chair, to Mr. Fogan.
Yeah, it's an important reminder, Councillor Norton. Thank you for that. I guess the other piece I'll throw on this, well, twofold. One, for those out there who are wondering where their water meters are. That conversation continues, and one of the things on the work plan for next year will be a long-term financial plan for the utility for water. So certainly there's still work being done, and we'll know more in 2024 when that financial plan comes out. And the other piece, I think that's incredibly important, that it's funny, we kind of take it for granted now when we're talking about rates and what we're doing next year. This century, St. John has gone through 2 massive water projects, and we have the most modern potable drinking water and wastewater system. I don't know, I'll leave it to the experts, but I'll say province, Atlantic Canada, I don't know any other city who's done those 2 major projects so close back to back. So, no longer, when I grew up skating on the Kennebecasis River, we didn't skate near the brown patch in the corner. There's no more brown patches on the St. John River in the wintertime because we're treating all our sewage. St. John on the potable side, I haven't heard recently. We used to win all sorts of awards on the quality of our drinking water. So I know that, the CAO will probably pipe in on that shortly. So yeah, we're talking about the financial side today, but it's a quality system. Rates have been frozen for the potable side for 6 years, and certainly we talk all the time about inflation going up over those 6 years. So great job to the team. There he is. CAO McGovern, did you want to jump in with a comment?
It is still the great tasting award-winning St. John water. Has been recognized, and I know will continue to be recognized as such going forward. So,
I thought so. Thanks for that. Yeah. So anyway,
we did want to just, Mr. Chair, I was going to say we did want to give the other utilities a chance to win the award too. So otherwise, it's
you get plaques for this. When you present the budget, you should just line up the trophies in front of your camera. Anyway, yeah. So the motion's on the floor. All in favor of the recommendation signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Contrary minded, yeah, another unanimous vote. We'll see that on council on Monday. Thank you for that, team. And that moves us to the final item, which took the CFO and I a couple of minutes to talk about this to get my head around it. This is so cool. Anyway, the CFO Fudge, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Sullivan, committee members. We'll go back a bit. As part of the city's 10-year financial plan, and when we were implementing our financial policies, council approved 2 relevant policies of this conversation this afternoon: the debt management policy and the operating and capital reserve policy. Those policies both include in their inner kit, they include clauses that allow the city to borrow from reserve funds as a source of internal financing of capital projects under certain conditions. Some of those conditions being that the borrowing cannot adversely affect the intended purpose of the reserve. There must be a plan to repay the reserve within a reasonable amount of time, and the borrowing must be approved by Common Council. So here's how it works. Essentially, the city would borrow from the reserves and create an inter-fund debenture with that restricted reserve. The benefits the city would have by doing this would be allowing us to pay interest to ourselves. And the benefits to the reserve funds is that the reserve funds would have a return on investment and would grow by the interest that you'd otherwise pay to a debenture. So in this case, over a 10-year period, the city would repay the loan to the reserve fund over 10 years. So it'd be a $6 million debenture, so $600,000 a year back into the reserve fund. But it would actually also pay $1.7 million of interest into the reserve fund over the same period, rather than to the province for a debenture. This will also be paid over a shorter time. We typically do a debenture for the general fund for over 15 years. We're going to do this over 10 years for this purpose. So the City of Fredericton have been implementing the strategy for some time, given they've been in a position to do so because they've had sufficient reserve funds. And now 5 years after we put the policies in place, and 5 years after following our financial plan, we're able to capitalize on this opportunity as well at the right time, by the way, when interest rates are at a high and they're on the rise. So we believe the reserve balances that we have now are sufficient to recommend an inter-fund borrowing of the $6 million. So $6 million, just for the Finance Committee's knowledge, is about 17 or 18% of our reserve balance. And again, the principal payments would be repaid equally over 10 years, and interest payments be remade into the reserve fund, letting the reserve fund grow over that 10-year period. Mr. Levine has corresponded with the Department of Local Government to ensure that the process meets provincial requirements, and they refer to this as an interfund debenture as well. The rates for the last debenture sold must be used for this purpose, as advised by the province. The province also requires a council resolution, much like our policy does, that authorizes the interfund borrowing. And the province will be sent a copy of the interfund debenture, so this debenture is in your kit, and that would be signed by myself. And once executed, the province will actually register the debenture or interfund debenture into their system, and it will show up as part of the city's debt profile until the reserve fund is repaid. So this is fully documented, and there's a high level of governance around this process with respect to oversight of the province as well. So with that, we're excited with the recommendation, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Questions or comments from the committee?
Can I move the recommendation? It's perfect, makes perfect economic sense. I love it.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Radwan. Thanks for the second, and your hand is up. Go ahead.
I just quickly want to say, Chair, that this is the coolest thing from watching the previous council cringe almost every single meeting because they were cutting $10 million to us borrowing from ourselves and paying interest to ourselves instead of somebody else is great news. So great job to staff, and hats off to the previous council and our team for being able to stick with the financial policies so that we can continue on this good trajectory. It's great.
Thanks, Councillor. $1.7 million in savings in real dollars because we're following our financial plan and we've got a crackerjack team. I think interfund debenture is my new favorite term. I got to get it on a shirt. It's awesome. So we've got the motion on the floor. On the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Contrary minded. Again, carried unanimously. That comes to the conclusion of our agenda. Neat stuff.
Motion to adjourn.
We'll get there, Councillor Lowe.
I was going to say, Councillor Lowe's not here. I'm just doing it for him.
The ghost of Councillor Lowe. Our enterprise resource management system. Our work is done with the general operating budget for next year. Now we're sending it off to council. Same with the draft utility fund. Incredibly responsible, both with lots of improvements to the quality of life in the city of St. John. And then that really cool interfund debenture that will enter our lexicon, just again, pay off from following a financial plan. That's fantastic. So we've got the motion to adjourn from our worship. So therefore, our finance committee meeting, second in that, Councillor Hickey. We're adjourned. Have a great evening, everybody.